Hi, I'm Tyson Franklin, and welcome to this week's episode of Podiatry Marketing. With me, as he is every week, he's a handsome bugger. It is Big Jim Mack. How you doing today, Jim?
I'm doing well, Tyson. Thanks for the flattering intro as always. I do appreciate that.
I'd love to see if I can just put you off your game right at the beginning of the podcast.
Uh, yeah, I mean, like the big Jim Mack stuff. Like, it's funny now. I'll sometimes get on calls with some of our listeners. Will have questions about topics, and maybe we'll get
Yeah.
on a Google Meet call. And one of the favorite things they like to do is like before we get to start talking, they're like, "Hey, Big Jim Mack." They always like to like throw in the Big Jim Mack there. Or is it okay if I call you Big Jim Mack? Yeah, it's definitely it's a fun little way that we can tell that some of the fans and some listeners are into the show. So it's a good thing.
60 years time, it'll on
I
your
won't be around.
tombstone, it'll say Jim McDaniel, only it'll have Big Jim Mack. And
You
people
never
go,
know.
"Oh, I've heard of him. I have heard of him." So anyway, what are we talking about today?
So today we're going to kind of continue the trend of talking about different AI tools. We talked about different ways of doing dictation and kind of having a personal scribe in a way previously.
Yeah.
Talked about some Chat GPT and Search GPT, but today we're going to talk a little bit about conversational AI and some of the use cases. Biggest one being kind of talking about how your clinic currently receives phone calls. Like, how do you route those calls? How do you provide a great patient experience? And is it time now for these kind of conversational AIs to have an opportunity to maybe take over some of those? Whether it's one of your office members, staff members, maybe it's you're using an outside answering service, maybe you're using one of those annoying kind of phone tree systems. But we're
Yeah.
gonna get it. We're gonna get into the ways that people have been previously trying to take calls and some of the pros and cons, and then to kind of see where the state of AI is as far as trying to make this a better experience, not only for you and your staff, but also for the patients.
And I think that's the big thing too. It's how is it for the patient?
Yeah.
So where do we start?
Yeah. So I'd say we just jump in a little bit about kind of like what are the tools or what's the technology that we've used in the past, right? Or to receive these phone calls, and what are the kind of some of the pitfalls or things to consider. Obviously, the most common thing that's been around the longest is having one of your staff members try to take those calls, right?
Yeah.
So the phone rings and it's someone on your staff who
A
has the
human.
yeah, a human on the
A
other side of the
human.
phone, which is pretty rare these days, right? Like,
It is.
but definitely, I know whenever I'm calling my bank or any other kind of credit card, I had to recently cancel a business credit card, and all I wanted to do was talk to a human. I didn't want to go through any of the other steps. What is the fastest way to get to a human? But there are some downfalls with doing that, especially if you have a busy clinic and that person is trying to multitask.
Mm.
Number one, how long is it going to take them to pick up that phone call, right? If they're doing multiple things, maybe it's 3 or 4 rings. And I think people these days, when you're not picking up the phone quickly, it gives them an opportunity to either hang up and call somebody else or just feel already like it's not your call. Their call is not really that important to your clinic.
Mm.
And that's a concern. Another big concern is that, if you don't have multiple phone lines, or if you do have multiple phone lines, but no one's answering that, you get 2 or 3 calls around the same time. That can be a problem because someone's on hold. You're talking to that other person, and it seems like the person you're talking with is always the person that's going to take the longest, right? And
Oh, yeah.
like, even though you've got 2 or 3 calls, it always is the person that has 30 questions or 20 questions. You want to make sure you answer it thoroughly, but it's really degrading the kind of patient or customer experience for the people that are now on hold. So, obviously you do get a human voice. Sometimes you do get direct answers. It's a direct connection to the clinic, but there are kind of some negative impacts of just only having humans answering the phone.
It's yeah. I do recall having the receptionist there, and that was why sometimes clinics had 2 receptionists and you had 4 or 5 phone lines coming in because you couldn't rely just on having that one phone line. And it'd be the same thing if they were ringing through the phone line and it was engaged. Okay, I'll ring back in 5 minutes. If it's still engaged, you're like, "What's going on?" And if it was the 3rd time it was engaged, you would ring a competitor.
Yeah, absolutely. And that kind of leads into the next technology. And that's, if it's the phone line is busy, or maybe that just, based on that it's a small clinic, they don't have enough staff or have enough revenue to bring on someone to answer the phone calls. You're getting, basically your voicemail, right? It's going
Yeah.
straight to voicemail. Leave your name. When you're available to come into the clinic. If returning clinic, we'll get back to you as soon as possible. And I think over time, people just, I don't know. I don't know about me. Maybe I'm just impatient or what, but I hate leaving voicemails. I know it's going to take a long, it feels like it's going to take a long time to get replied to. I actually prefer those ones where they say that if you type in your number, we'll call you back,
Yeah.
once we're available. Cause that feels like, it feels like there's like a call to action there that feels a lot more satisfying than just leaving some random message. I just don't, maybe I'm just an impatient person, but just leaving voicemails feels like there's no real time interaction. You feel like you have an urgent question and you get a voicemail about maybe it's not even that urgent. Maybe it's just about, is this insurance accepted, or what's appointment availability, and having to kind of do the phone tag thing because you're calling at a time that's convenient for you, but maybe you have to go pick up the kids at school and that's the time the clinic's going to call back. It always seems like you get called back at kind of not a great time. And then, it can also, whether it be a real person or this voicemail, that there's only a limited amount of time that you can do some of these tasks, right? If you call up the clinic at 11 p.m., no one's going to be there. You're just going to leave a
No.
voicemail, and you're just
Yeah.
pushing more work to the next day. So that's something that's one type of system that feels a bit dated, but still a lot of clinics use.
Well, I do know a lot of podiatrists still have answering machines,
Yeah,
and they're solo practitioners, and they will just let everything go to the answering machine, hoping people will leave a message, and then they call them back in between patients or when they get a break. But then you don't know, are they going to call them back in that half hour, or are they going to call them back at the end of the day? And I did have someone tell me recently, they just went, if I'm really busy, I just don't call them back. And I'm like, oh, don't say that,
yeah,
because they just go, when I'm really busy, I just don't call them back. Don't need to.
yeah. That's not going to lead to any good Google reviews or a lot of goodwill with the patient if they do end up coming to see you. So.
Yeah, I know. Anyway, so what else you've got? So the voicemail, the basic phone systems, which that has been around forever.
Yeah. So the next one would be kind of like the phone trees, right? The kind of, obviously even smaller clinics, I will sometimes, phone up, or if you call in, you wouldn't expect them to have that, but it's like, it's no one answers. You're just going to get this message. And this is like what I said, the frustration of the credit card companies or the banks sometimes. It's like push one for this, push two
Oh
for
yeah.
this, push three for appointments. If you're a established patient, push four. And then usually these days, they never give you the option to like get in touch with the operator. Like that used to be like my cheat code is like push 0 to get to the operator. And I wouldn't listen to any of them. I just want to like get to a human as soon as possible. A lot of them don't have them anymore. Like I said, you're just kind of waiting. And it always feels like they say 30 seconds. It's always 30 seconds more information you really care about. Even if it's, it just, you feel like you're just wasting time. You want to talk to somebody. And you're not going to necessarily get that answer right away, because sometimes that even those will kind of get back ended with voicemail as well. So
Mm.
it's time consuming. You don't always get to talk to somebody and kind of move forward on that patient journey when you're really feel like you want to. And there's no personalization, right? It's the same. You're gonna be treated at the same time every time you call those phone trees, and it's just you kind of get into that routine. And obviously, it's maybe better than nothing, but at the same time, it can be a frustrating thing for a lot of folks.
So the phone tree is almost like a phone funnel. It's almost like pushing you down through. But one thing I did to speed up this process sometimes, usually if it's somewhere where they want money, I just hit the one that says I want to give them money. I want to pay something. I don't.
Billing.
I may not want that, because that one will get answered pretty quickly, and then it gets answered by a human, and you go, oh, did I push the wrong button? Oh, can you just push me across to whatever my inquiry was? And usually that can sometimes speed it up.
That's good. That's a good strategy. I'll have to remember that one.
But it is annoying, especially when you're listening through and it goes, yeah, press 1, and for this, press 2, and you go, when are they getting to get to what I want? And then it gets all that, for everything else, press 9. Because you've just gone through the other 8 and they didn't apply. Okay.
So now we'll jump into conversational AI and kind of how this technology is kind of a growing segment, especially for making appointments. And what is conversational AI? So it's really kind of these basically AIs now have kind of natural language processing. Not only can you go on a chat GPT and, type in text, it will sometimes be able to tell what you're, basically do natural voice processing. Basically, you can talk like on my ChatGPT app. I can talk to my
Mm.
ChatGPT and it'll give me answers back. And sometimes it has things I told it, so it has certain context available. So there's some different softwares out there, and I have no association with any of them, but one of them is called Wendy. And basically, what it does is it has kind of advanced machine learning, and basically what it sets apart from voicemails and phone trees is that this is like a real-time conversation. It'll ask you questions. You'll call up. You can have multiple lines on some of these systems, so there's never a busy signal.
Yeah.
But you'll get directly to one of these conversational AIs, and they'll ask you, "Hello, how's this going?" Sometimes they'll say they're an AI. Sometimes they will sound almost human in a way. They'll ask you your name. And what reason are you calling? And then it will sometimes, it's HIPAA compliant, so it can gather some of that patient information about, whether or not, what insurance do you have? And sometimes it can run an immediate check to see if that's an insurance plan that you have, that you take. Also, it can, sometimes sync up with different scheduling calendars and different EMRs to see when your actual availability is
Okay.
for a new patient or for an established patient. So it's a very interesting way to kind of maybe combat some of the, you know, issues associated with some more of the legacy ways of getting in touch with the clinic over the phone.
Just like I've used ChatGPT a few times just to have a conversation. I think my wife uses it more than me. I think she talks to ChatGPT sometimes more than she talks to me, depending on what mood she's in.
Sure.
But yeah, you just know this is where it's going to go because the few times I've used AI and I've been talking to it, and like I said, and my wife says exactly the same thing. She goes, sometimes I forget that I'm actually talking to a machine because the conversation just seems so natural, even though it still sort of sounds like still AI, doesn't sound like a human 100%, but just the interaction and the
Yeah.
backwards and forwards. And sometimes you can try and throw a curly question in there and it just nails it.
And like you said, it's really about those follow-up questions, which are important, right? Like, how can I help you today? And then kind of getting your information, and then it's able to adapt some of these things in real time, right? So if you're a podiatry clinic, for example, and if someone's mentioning that they have like a red hot swollen foot with a wound, there's ways of like triggering different kind of keywords to say, hey, it'd be best for you to, immediately come into the clinic, or maybe whatever your protocol is with those types of
Mm,
things, you're able to have the conversational AI learn some of those ways that you want to have certain things seen. So you're not just, being held liable that your AI didn't recognize that someone had a foot infection, for example. But like I talked about, it can also ask questions about their insurance coverage to make sure that it can adjust the response appropriately. It's also, like I talked about, just there's this flexibility which makes the conversation smoother and reduces that frustration to a lot of these systems, people have, unless you just get that really helpful, receptionist that has all the time in the world to spend with you on the phone. But that receptionist probably also has other tasks in the clinic. So if you're really looking not only to improve that kind of workflow as far as the calls go, but also the workflow in the clinic itself. These conversational AIs could be something that could be really, really beneficial. Like I talked about, sometimes it's integrated appointment scheduling, right? Instead of someone having to physically look up and get into your EMR and say, oh, we have these days and these days, things like Wendy and other types of softwares that can be integrated into your EMR, it just saves the clinic time, but also saves the patient time. And it kind of eliminates that phone tag or that back and forth that just is really, really frustrating these days.
yeah. Well, we know, like, as podiatrists, and when you've done podiatry for enough years, and when you're with a patient, it wouldn't surprise you if you said to someone, 90% of my conversations are exactly the same. The same question, they'll tell me the same things, you'll ask the same questions, they give the same responses. And yes, every individual is different, but you can take that, like you're saying, take that from a patient ringing the clinic to make an appointment. It's going to be less complicated there than it is with a patient in the room. So you can see how AI can really just take over that particular role, especially when it's answering basic questions, giving basic information, making a basic appointment, and who it is that they want to see.
And I think with some of these AIs, like I said, the different kind of ways that, you know, you want to filter, or, let's say you only want to see routine care on a Tuesday afternoon, you'll be able to build in different types of filtering tools into the way that they respond to patients, right? Just because you have open appointments, maybe like every day of the week, maybe they talk about what they need and you're able to better I think that's one of the things that people have about using some of these tools is like, well, I don't want to use online scheduling because then they can kind of like have free reign within my
Yeah.
schedule. I only want to see certain patients on certain days, and I think some of these AI tools will be able to kind of better, kind of, for lack of a better term, kind of filter those patients to the right spots in a way. Also, say like I talked about, the clinic's open from maybe, the phone's open maybe from 7 until 5 or 7 until 6, but there's a lot of time, so that's, what, maybe 13 hours when someone is not physically present in your clinic and it's going to voicemail.
Mm.
These AI agents, this conversational AI can be available 24/7 with consistently, pulling in patients, making appointments. It's not just waiting for that staff member to show up at 6 or 7 a.m. to pull off the voicemails, or to go to the email to look and see who's wanting to make an appointment. This can be a task that's automated, and really, whether it's weekends or holidays, just keep the clinic moving in a positive direction and get people on the schedule. I think it's a really, really powerful thing in that way. Obviously that's kind of the promise of like having your clinic be online in the first place, is that, you have this kind of 24/7 online version of your clinic, but now you can actually make appointments during that time. Makes it very, very powerful.
It's it's just amazing where it's headed. Like, yeah, like the whole AI, like I mention it every couple of weeks when we talk about it, just how fast this is progressing. And the podiatrists that get on board, the early adapters or adopters, yeah, so the early adopters of this, I think, are really going to benefit from the ones who sit on the hands and go, oh, I just want to stick to having Mabel out the front answering the phone, that interaction. So I think this sort of stuff, people need to investigate it.
No, absolutely. And I think there's also, ways that it can be even more personalized and like context aware. So let's say, you have a patient that missed an appointment, there's going to be kind of recall campaigns that can be done with these conversational AIs. Like, hello, Mrs. Jones, we know that you missed this appointment last whatever day. Would you be interested in rescheduling? And instead of tying somebody up to have to do those types of recall campaigns, it can be a voice, it can be interactive, it can get more people on the books. Whether the person's going to come back or not, or if you want to see them back after they're missing appointments, that's topic for a different discussion. But whether it's maybe you want to do 1 year recalls on orthotics, right? Instead of just sending an email blast, maybe it is these conversational AIs that someone has
Mm.
opted into that are calling them and getting them back on the books, and basically automating everything from the phone calls to them being on your schedule. So it can be a real, real time saver when it
That'd be
comes to
really
that.
cool. Yeah, can you
Yeah.
imagine your phone rings, you answer, you go, hello, this is Tyson. He goes, hey, Tyson, how you doing? Just, it's Gordon the robot from,
From Dr. McDaniel's office.
yeah, for Dr. McDonald's office. And it's time for your 1 year review. Would you like to make that appointment now? And I go, oh, I don't know. What were the football scores on the weekend? And it tells you. You go, this is pretty cool. I reckon you would have a bit of fun with it, and then you would probably make the appointment. Because have you been to the Sphere at all?
I've not been to the Vegas Sphere yet, no.
Yeah, so when we went there, they had the AI robots in the foyer area that you could talk to before we went in for the show.
Okay.
And they were very interactive. Some people were trying to throw them off by asking them questions that were really left field, and every time just nailed it. They brought the conversation right back to what the person was really trying to say. And who was the main character from the Terminator?
Arnold Schwarzenegger.
I know the actor. The kid that he was there to protect.
Edward Furlong? John Connor?
John Connor. So the person walked up to one of the robots, and the robot said, oh, and what's your name, sir? He said, John Connor. And he went, aha, aha, aha. Very funny. And I suppose with next year is James Cameron. So it just straight away just knew what this person was trying to do but kept it going. So it was really interesting to watch what they were doing with AI in there.
No, absolutely. I'd say the real kind of the evolution of our kind of going from this, these kind of older systems with voicemails and phone trees and now to conversational AI, it's going to potentially kind of transform the way clinics, handle patient communication, kind of like the examples we provided.
Mm.
Like we talked about, voicemails are very passive and frustrating for people. End up playing phone tag. No one likes kind of navigating through phone trees. So hopefully the adaptability with this conversational AI with tools like Wendy can allow clinics to really provide better patient experience, kind of reduce the staff workload and like let them take care of patients in the clinic and really provide that great patient experience. Just to really have kind of a, you know, as these AIs even get better, it's going to provide kind of a human-like interaction that will hopefully be satisfying to both the clinics and to the people that are, visiting the clinics and making these phone calls.
Yeah, well, seeing how far it's come, even when they have the little chat box down on the right-hand side of some websites, and how accurate they've been just when you're talking to a computer. So they've been able to do that for years. So that AI, I think this part is going to move ahead really fast until there'll be a couple of years you'll be ringing places you won't know whether you're talking to a human or not, and you don't care as long as you get your appointment or get the information you need.
No, absolutely. I think it's something that it doesn't have to be used all at once. I think there's use cases from the software if you're still wanting to see if it works, or using it like I said in the evenings or on the weekends or on holidays and seeing if that test driving some of these things. But I think this is the way things are moving because it's operationally efficient on both sides. Patients call in and they get to make an appointment. They get to kind of have that feeling that okay, things are moving forward as opposed to like I've got to call 3, 4 more times. They're going to call me back, and then we have to kind of do that kind of dance. So I think it's a win-win both for the patient and for the clinic. So I'm excited to see kind of what direction this heads. And as there's more, obviously advancements made in this field, we'll touch on them and we'll have additional podcasts on the subject.
Oh no, I'm looking forward to it because I think way back when the episode where we mentioned ChatGPT the first time, and how much it's changed. We listen to that now. How much it's changed over that couple of year period.
Yep, absolutely.
So remember the first time you brought it up and I was just like, had no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah, it's like kind of happens slowly and then all of a sudden it's just like it's everywhere, right? So,
well, now you can probably mention it to my mum who's 80 and she'd probably know exactly what you're talking about. So that has gone really fast and I think it's just going to keep moving that quick. So
I totally agree.
It's been a great topic. Love this one.
Glad you enjoyed it, Tyson.
Okay, Jim, I look forward to talking to you next week.
All right, sounds great.
Okay, see ya.
Bye now.